The NBA draft lottery is set. One of the most anticipated classes of freshman players ever. There are 6 of them on your screen right now. The Wizards will have their choice of them all. That 14% chance of the ping pong balls bouncing their way turned up Washington, and now we can officially speculate who goes where in the top 14. No one better for this exercise than Adam Finkelstein, our director of basketball scouting. He'll be in Chicago for the Combine this week. All right, Adam, this didn't take you any time at all to throw your top 14 together once we found out the order. And a week ago, you played this out with a mock draft based on straight probability. AJ Dybantsa was the #1 pick then to the Wizards. Is he still?
He is, but what I said then I will repeat now, and that is that this is not 2023 when the Spurs drafted Wemby. It's not even 2025 when the Mavs drafted Cooper Flagg. This is more of a choice. Now, maybe not as much of a choice as Atlanta had in 2024 because that was so wide open. What I mean by that is AJ Dybantsa is the favorite. I think it would be disingenuous to suggest otherwise. But the narrative that all 30 teams would immediately take him at #1 without doing their due diligence, I think that was an exaggeration. What comes next for Washington at this point is a deep dive on, I believe, 4 different prospects. Dybantsa is certainly the top of that list, but they will also, I think, do that on Darryn Peterson, maybe even on Cameron Boozer, and I think also on Caleb Wilson. When you have the #1 pick in the draft and everybody is waiting for you, there's no reason not to. So they are going to have everybody into the facility, work everybody out, do the medical, do the background checks, do the psychological profiling, do it all. And they may also canvass the market. If it turns out they like someone else other than AJ Dybantsa, maybe they'll see what Utah would do with their pick. Maybe they'll see what other people have in store for a potential package to be the #1 pick. But at the end of the day, I do expect that Dybantsa will be the choice. He had a phenomenal freshman season at BYU. He's 6'9". He's athletic. He's got an elastic body type. He's a big-time scorer. And this is a huge day for the Washington Wizards.
That would be a very NFL draft-like approach to maybe move out of that pick because they see somebody else of value to build around that Wizards roster that added Trae Young and Anthony Davis. We'll see if AD sticks in the nation's capital. All right, 2 falls to the Utah Jazz. Who do you have the Jazz taking, Adam?
Well, this one's going to be complicated. I think if Dybantsa goes 1, there's 3 different prospects that will get a good long look here, and that is Peterson, Boozer, and Wilson. Now, I do think that Peterson will be the pick here. Remember, they shored up their front line by trading for Jaren Jackson. They've got Lauri Markkanen back, and Keontae George is coming off a breakout season. More importantly than all that, I think Peterson is the prospect with the highest upside. Now, if you only saw him play this year at Kansas, you're probably distracted by some of the availability issues. But what I can tell you about this year is that his shooting profile went through the roof. We didn't think he was that type of shot maker in high school. What we did think was that he was a big-time athlete who could attack the rim and had a terrific overlap of positional size, length, and physicality. Now, you combine that guy we saw in high school with the shot maker we saw this year at Kansas, and you say, hey, if he's healthy and he proves to be durable, could he be the best player in this draft? And the answer to that question is yes. And that's why I think that Utah will ultimately go with Darryn Peterson, not just because he fits next to Keontae George and their new front line, but because he has a chance 10 years from now to be the best player to come out of this draft.
Yeah, the Jazz, despite all of the fines for tanking, are signaling, hey, the rebuild thing here in Utah is over. We're going for it to a degree. Maybe just keep somebody with a check of the creatine for Peterson once he gets to the NBA, Adam, right? All right, let's go to 3 here. That is the Memphis Grizzlies. And I know you've rattled off a bunch of names here in terms of how they could fall 1 through 4. Who goes 3 to Memphis?
I think this one's complicated. I wrote earlier this week that I thought Caleb Wilson would have interest from Memphis. And Memphis, if they fell in the top 3, would be a team that could potentially mix it up because the top 3 have been widely assumed to be Dybantsa, Peterson, and Boozer. But I still think that Memphis could be very interested in Caleb Wilson. Right now, I'm still sticking with Cameron Boozer. I've been saying this for well over a year. He's got the highest floor in this draft. He is the surest thing in this draft. His overlap of physicality, of skill, and of basketball IQ is second to none. People are going to question his creation upside. People are going to question his athleticism, and it's going to be a conversation about long-term potential, which is something that others have always kind of handicapped him in. But the bottom line is he was the best player in recent history of high school basketball. He was the best player in college basketball this past season. And I think his ability to dictate winning from day one in the NBA will also be probably the best in this class. So I do think Memphis, who has a pristine recent draft history and has shown no hesitancy to think against the grain, I do think they'll consider Caleb Wilson, but at the end of the day, I still think Boozer's a top 3 pick.
And the Bulls get the 4th overall pick, which means the Pacers miss out completely on this lottery after rolling the dice a little bit with the Ivica Zubac trade at the deadline. We'll get to that in a moment, but Chicago's up now. Adam, who do you have going to the Windy City?
You know, it's interesting because I think that they've drafted a lot of forwards over the years, but if this goes as we expect, they might have their choice of forwards here. And I don't see how they could pass on whoever falls to 4, whether that's Boozer, whether that's Wilson, or maybe even if that's Peterson. So whoever's still on the board, I think will be Chicago's pick. In this scenario, it will be Wilson. Now, what I will tell you about Caleb Wilson is if you've seen some of these videos to come out from his pre-draft training, they look phenomenal. And now, I'm usually not one to be fooled by those things. I mean, remember when Ben Simmons would have one of those come out every year and you'd be like, oh, Ben Simmons can shoot now, and he could never shoot. But I'm just telling you what, that Caleb Wilson highlight video that just came out looks spectacular. And I will not be surprised if there's significant buzz about him this week in Chicago and if he has a real chance to move up in this draft. If he falls to 4, I think Chicago takes him, they start to build around him, and they figure out to do with some of the other young forward assets that a previous front office acquired in recent years. And I do think that's the key. This is a new front office in Chicago. They're not going to be committed to former draft picks. And so while there are a lot of young forwards here, Caleb Wilson is the best long-term prospect on the board. He overachieved and exceeded all expectations this year at North Carolina. He looks phenomenal in the pre-draft process. So if they get him at 4, I think they'll be very happy.
The Pacers' name came up at 5, but that means the pick goes to the Los Angeles Clippers. You've used the word complicated a couple times here already, and with all the point guards still on the board and most of those premier bigs off the board, Adam, what do the Clippers do at 5?
I think they really explore making a move here, and I don't want to start speculating about a trade less than an hour after the lottery became official. But I think if the Clippers had an opportunity to move up, they would be very interested in doing that. I think maybe if they had an opportunity to move down and pick up another asset, if they thought the guy they wanted might be available at 6, 7, or 8, they could be interested in doing that. Remember, this is a team facing a lot of uncertainty with kind of the fallout of the Kawhi Leonard investigation still to come. So the more young assets they can acquire, the better. If everything stays as it is and they're trying to figure out who's got the best chance to play with Darius Garland, my pick would be Keaton Wagler. Darius Garland is someone they acquired right at the deadline this year. He's viewed as a future cornerstone of that franchise. And of those 4 point guards, the 4 freshmen one and dones, Wagler is the one with the most on-off ball versatility. And there's some people who think he might have the highest upside. I'm going to tell you this, Chris. This guy came out of nowhere to have the freshman season he did at Illinois. He led them all the way to the Final Four. And at numerous steps along the way, we were all thinking there should be more of a learning curve than there is right now. I remember watching him in Indianapolis, ironically, at the Final Four, thinking, how is this moment not too much for him? But no moments were too much for him. He didn't have anywhere near the learning curve that he should have had. And that could be a sign of real optimism about what he can become, because he's still just scratching the surface of his potential. So if it stays like this, and if the Clippers hold that 5th pick, I think Wagler right now looks like he could be the guy.
Yeah, scary thought that Wagler still has a lot ahead of him in terms of his potential. Like you said, maybe just scratching the surface. All right, that is 1 through 5 of Adam's mock draft. Now that we know how the NBA draft lottery will shake out, AJ Dybantsa, number 1 overall to Washington, followed by Darryn Peterson to Utah, Cameron Boozer to Memphis, Caleb Wilson from North Carolina to Chicago, and Keaton Wagler, the Illinois point guard, going to the Los Angeles Clippers, getting that pick by way of the Indiana Pacers. When we come back here on HQ, we will keep this thing rolling. The next 5 picks, yeah, this guy's still on the board, Darius Acuff Jr. One team would love to get his scoring ability. Kingston, Flemings, one of those other point guards. Brayden, Burries. Boy, this draft is deep. All right, let's keep it rolling here with Adam Finkelstein now. That NBA mock draft, that the lottery is settled. We are on number 6 here, Adam, and that goes to the Brooklyn Nets. They took a point guard last year. What is the biggest need, or do they just simply look at the board and say, this is the best player available, this is what we need in Brooklyn?
Yeah, I think it's about the best available player, but it's also about who has a chance to become their offensive alpha. And so that's why I think position doesn't really matter. And that's why I think Darius Acuff will be the guy if he's available at 6. The Nets had 4 bites at the apple last year in the first round, and they got some quality pieces, but they did not get someone who projects to be able to be a true focal point for the team offensively. Yegor Demin was their lottery pick last year. He's a great passer. He's a connector. He's made huge strides as a shooter, and he looks like a quality pick. But Darius Acuff is someone who can come take the ball from day one and create offense for himself and others. So I think this would make a lot of sense in Brooklyn. Acuff was the SEC Player of the Year. He was the best freshman guard in college basketball. You can make a case he was the best guard, period, in college basketball. He has a unique ability to get to his spots. He's a big-time passer. He takes care of the ball, and he is as polished a shot-creating guard as there is in this draft. And I think if Brooklyn gets him at number 6, Nets fans who are a little disappointed with the outcome of tonight's lottery might feel a lot better about their cases moving forward.
Adam, obviously we've seen guys outside of the top 5 turn into arguably the best player in that draft. But as we sit and talk about Darius Acuff Jr. here today, it feels like you could make an argument now that he's the best player in this draft.
Yeah, I think no one questions the offense, right? So it's going to come down to 2 main variables. The physicality, how big is he? A lot of people have referred to him as an undersized scoring lead guard this year. I think based on his high school measurements that he might measure out this week in Chicago a little better than some expect. And then it comes down to the defense. And listen, the bottom line is he's not a particularly engaged defender. He often defends to the level of his competition. We saw that at Arkansas. He's got to keep raising the bar on that end of the floor, because if you look at recent draft history and some of the guys who haven't panned out to be quite as good as expected, sometimes it's because the defensive limitations are so significant that no matter how good the offense is, it can't justify it. And so that's the trap for Acuff. People who are concerned about the defense. If he can prove that, then he's got a chance to be off the board before 6.
All right, so we've got 2 point guards off the board now as we move down to 7. Sacramento, they could certainly use a lead guard. What do you have the Kings doing at 7?
We're going another point guard. Kingston Flemings, who's the best athlete of this bunch. Not just an explosive leaper, but he's got great pace and speed attacking. He can get to his pull-up anytime he wants. I'd say he's probably the best defender, or at least has the best defensive tools out of these 4 freshman point guards. The swing skill for him is the shooting, right? And he started the season at Houston just on an absolute heater, which was the complete opposite of what we expected. Now, gradually those percentages regressed a little bit, but they were still better than we expected. If he proves that he can make shots in the NBA, if he's someone you can't help off the ball, if he's someone you can't go under a ball screen on, then he too has a chance to be better than he would be as a number 7 pick. So I think for the Kings, this is a really good value and someone who you can hopefully trust to be your point guard of the future in Sacramento.
The Hawks made the playoffs this season, 6th seed in the Eastern Conference, and here they are with the 8th overall pick in next month's NBA draft. What does Atlanta do here?
Well, they might need a point guard of the future. Nickeil Alexander-Walker had a terrific season in Atlanta, but they moved off Trae Young. They've got a lot of assets in the middle of the lineup, and in this point guard heavy middle of the lottery, they should have some quality options here. I think Mikel Brown would be a really good piece here. He is so skilled with the basketball. I think he's the most skilled point guard in this draft. He's a much better shooter than his numbers indicate this year at Louisville. He's also a big-time passer. He sees the whole floor, and he can throw darts off the dribble with both hands. He's a late bloomer who now has really good positional size, and now we're seeing him start to evolve athletically. Now, the concerns, or maybe questions is a better word, are going to be about the defensive end. Shot selection is something that could have been better this year at Louisville, and durability, given some of the injuries we've seen. Now, if he can address all that, this would be tremendous value for Atlanta, and again, it would fit a point of need in their current lineup.
Dallas will build everything around Rookie of the Year, of course, Cooper Flagg. And so at number 9, the Mavericks have their selection. What do you think Dallas does here in the best interest of the last year's number 1 overall pick?
Well, remember, they've got a brand new front office. Masai Ujiri coming in, and then Mike Schmitz as well from the Portland Trail Blazers. Now, if all 4 point guards are off the board, I think Brayden Burries is the best available prospect. Brayden Burries is a two-way contributor. He's someone who can really get downhill with force, not just in the open floor, but he can turn the corner on ball screens if he gets to that second side of the floor. He's a good spot-up shooter, so he'll provide some floor spacing around Cooper Flag. And then he's got an NBA-ready body and is a plus defender. And I think that is probably the thing that people don't consider enough in the draft process, at least in public spaces. In front offices, they are very concerned about not bringing in a defensive liability. Brayden Burries, you don't have to worry about that. So he's a versatile offensive piece. He can defend his position. He fits a culture that you're going to have there around Cooper Flag, and he's someone who can come in and play immediate minutes. Remember, if Kyrie Irving gets healthy again, the point guard position will be all set. Cooper Flag had plenty of on-ball reps this year, so Burries would fit in nicely and really have an opportunity to grow in lockstep with Flag for the foreseeable future.
I don't know if it's a full teardown in Milwaukee, but certainly we will talk ad nauseum this offseason about Giannis Antetokounmpo and whether or not he continues to play for this franchise he led to an NBA championship not all that long ago. But at number 10 here, not knowing so much about what happens with Giannis, the Bucks just going to take the best guy available. Adam, what does Milwaukee do?
Yeah, that's right. I think they're going to take the highest upside prospect they can get at this spot. And in my opinion, that would be Nate Ament. Ament is a pretty polarizing prospect. There's a wide range of opinions on him. I've seen some say he could fall all the way out of the lottery. I don't buy that, to be candid. I mean, we're talking about a 6'10" combo forward who's like elite character, the best of the best, going to be beloved in any locker room he's at. And although his freshman season at Tennessee had some ups and downs, if you take a step back and you kind of chart his progression over the course of the last 3 years, it is distinctly linear. So this is a late bloomer who's getting better, who still has so much untapped potential, and is just going to be a sponge when it comes to coaching. So I think for the Bucks, they have an opportunity to get a young man like this in there. They'll be able to give him volume right off the bat, which will help to accelerate his development. I think this would be a worthwhile risk with the 10th pick in the draft.
All right, we are through the top 10 with our director of basketball scouting, his NBA mock draft. Here's a look at 6 through 10. Acuff to Brooklyn, Flemings to Sacramento, Brown to Atlanta, Burries to Dallas, and the run of guards over when we go to Nate Ament to Milwaukee at number 10. We continue on here on HQ with Adam Finkelstein and the quote-unquote old guys. We'll check in here. A couple of bigs from Michigan still on the board. Picks 1 through 10 in Adam Finkelstein's NBA mock draft down. Here comes 11 to the Golden State Warriors. And Adam, I don't think Golden State got what they wanted here in either trade value with an 11th overall pick or maybe player value in terms of trying to get a real immediate impact player for a championship run. What do the Warriors do at 11?
Well, you know what they did get, though? They got Steve Kerr back for 2 more years, and that tells us that that they're going to keep rolling out with the Steph Curry lineup. And it also tells us that the style of play is going to stay the same. And in that system, I think Aday would make a ton of sense. He becomes the first non-freshman to be picked in this draft, coming off not just a tremendous season that culminated with the national championship, but a season in which he got better and better as the year went on. This guy is 7'3", so he's giant, even by NBA standards. He's a big-time rim protector. We've seen his archetype be very well valued in the NBA over the years, but he's more than just a vertical spacer and shot blocker. He's also a big-time passer, which is going to be critical in Golden State because they can run all their actions with him on the floor. They can bring him up to the pinch post. They can play him off the elbows. He's a smart screener, so he can fit right in with what they're doing from day one and simultaneously build a bridge to the future and be a part of what the Warriors may look like in the post-Steph Curry, Steve Kerr, Draymond Green era, whenever that may come about.
Adam, when you say 7'3", people will think, oh, well, Victor Wembanyama is 7'4", but obviously very different games. You talked about the archetype fitting back into today's NBA. Why shouldn't people be surprised that a guy like Morrow would go in the lottery?
Well, you think about some of the players who have exceeded their draft stock in recent years, guys like Walker Kessler or Ryan Kalkbrenner, and a lot of them were just drop coverage monsters, players who could really fit that role in pick and roll defense. And Mara can do that. But what he can also do is provide you some deceptive versatility. This guy's first 2 years at UCLA, he blitzed ball screens. That means he trapped them. Again, he's 7'3", and he was out there trapping ball screens. It wasn't perfect, but he did it way better than someone his size should be capable of doing it. So to have that size, to be able to play that archetype where you are that drop coverage monster and yet have enough versatility to be able to do things different ways. Oh, and then, by the way, be able to learn under the guidance of a defensive savant like Draymond Green, I do think this makes a lot of sense for the Warriors. I
jokingly called some of these guys coming up here the old guys of the group. Technically, I guess they are. I'd like to be 23 or 22, though, again. Oklahoma City on the clock at number 12. Do we have Mara's teammate coming here to the Thunder?
We sure do. Speaking of old guys, Yaxel Lendeborg, going to be a 24-year-old NBA rookie, but he may be the most versatile player in this draft. 6'9" with a 7'4" wingspan, and he was defending point guards this year at Michigan. So he is switchable at least 1 through 4. And when you look at what OKC covets, they look at guys with a defensive mindset. He is that. He's also a ball mover. He's a big-time passer. He's unselfish. And the important number to know this year is that one at the very bottom of your screen. He shot 37% from the three-point line, which was a major improvement. Now, he's still got some maturing to do, but in OKC, where you have that culture, where you have that championship mentality, he would, I think, have to buy in very quickly. I think this would be a good fit for OKC and a great fit for Yaxel Lendeborg.
All right, we go to 13 here and down to the Miami Heat. Obviously, they've got some cornerstones to this franchise, but scoring would help, obviously. And this is one of my favorite scorers to watch this past year, in the last couple of years anyway, out of the SEC. Who do you have the Heat taking, Adam?
Labaron Philon. A year ago, he was viewed as a fringe first-round pick, and so he decided to go back to Alabama to help his draft stock, and boy, did he ever. Now, how did he do that? He proved that maybe he was the best shot creator in this draft, and a year ago, he was kind of viewed as a defensive-oriented utility guard, but right now he's someone who teams think has a chance to be a little bit of an engine on the offensive end of the floor, especially when you get outside that top 8 and you're asking yourself, who could really generate offensive looks? Philon's name is right at the top. He was an absolute just totally responsible for Alabama's offense this year. This was one of the fastest, most potent offenses in the entire country. This guy created pace. He did it with efficiency. He made strides with his shot making. He did just about everything on that end of the floor. And if he can rediscover that defensive blueprint that we saw in his freshman season, I think he would fit in beautifully with a Heat team that's got some questions to answer in the backcourt this offseason.
And as we round out the top 14 here, the NBA lottery, the Charlotte Hornets, clearly a team ascending when you can keep LaMelo Ball healthy, a team that made it to the play-in this year. What fits best for the Hornets at 14?
I think what would fit best would be sticking to the draft philosophy from last year that was so beneficial for them, right? Con Kneppel, Ryan Kalkbrenner, Sion James, and what was the common denominator between all those guys? They all had maturity. They were the adults in the room in their respective teams. And Koa Peat is cut from a very similar cloth. Miles Bridges' future in Charlotte is a little unclear, so the 4 spot would be one that they would have real interest in. And Peat has undeniable competitive and winning intangibles. This guy won 4 different high school state championships. He won 4 gold medals with USA Basketball. Then this year he won the Big 12 championship. He got to the Final Four. So everybody's going to talk about whether or not he can shoot. But what I can tell you is everybody needs to know this is a worker, this is a winner, this is someone who can get downhill, play off short rolls, give you some playmaking from the forward position, as a big-time rebounder, and somebody who is physically ready for the NBA from day one.
Yeah, if he acts like a man, he's certainly built like one there after a year with Arizona. Adam, good stuff, man. We've got the NBA draft now set in terms of the lottery. I know you will be in Chicago for the Combine. We'll be following your coverage there on social media and, of course, CBSSports.com. Let's give you another look here at 11 through 14. Mara to Golden State, Lendeborg to OKC, Philon to Miami, and Koa Peat rounding out the lottery going to Charlotte. Adam Finkelstein, our director of basketball scouting at CBS Sports, with his NBA mock draft just in the moments following the ping pong balls in Chicago.